If there are questions for Lori or Rebecca or Erica, please let us know.
Hello, my question is for Lori. For the child support, do you have a program that follow up with the dads so they have visitation with their children? I've heard a lot of dads say they have to pay child support, but they're not able to see their children.
That is true. Visitation and child support do not go hand in hand in the law, which means that someone who is paying child support does not necessarily have the rights to visit their child, and the same is true as if they're not paying child support, that does not exclude them from having the right to see their child. So they are not connected in the eyes of the law. Logically, maybe, but not in the eyes of the law. I work a lot with gentlemen on paternity because that's really where the visiting issue comes in. Like I said, over 80% of these children born of the men that I work with are born outside of marriage, which means that they have no legal right to that child, no legal tie to that child until either a court or they sign what's called a recognition of parentage. Most of them sign what's called a recognition of parentage because, let's face it, they haven't had great luck in court before. That's not someplace they want to go. So they'll take the easy way, which gives them no rights. So bottom line is they have to go to court then to establish rights to see their child. They don't have that right, even if they have the legal tie and are paying support.
Question, whoops, geez, hi. Hello, everybody. We have a question from Greater Minnesota, and Erica, if you could come into the mic as well, please. That'd be great. This is a question, do you think that the support for the doula, for a doula, helps with bringing the women to full-term birth, as well as the education of what's happening with their body?
Here's all the doulas. What do you guys think? Yes, we think it's a combination of all of it, but I think particularly the education about how to have a healthy pregnancy, because a lot of women have a lot of misconceptions, right guys? About what is healthy and what you should be eating and like how you should be trying to remedy some of the stress you're having in your relationship and the implications that has for your baby. And so I think it's the education and the support combined.
It's another question for the doulas, and obviously the nature of your work is very private. Do you guys have any volunteer opportunities?
I think that something that's unique about our project is that we pay our staff. So of all the other prison doula projects, most of those are voluntary. And the reason we pay our staff is because we want to maintain and help all of the doulas hone this expertise of being a prison doula. So we do have volunteer opportunities, particularly in the area of fundraising. But yes, we use volunteers. Like right now, many of the people around the room that are helping with the mics are actually my interns. So we take a lot of interns. We hope it can be a learning experience for people as they're going through school, because it's something people, as has been mentioned, don't have a lot of exposure to.
We have a question for Lori. In your opinion, what are the most important and relevant topics to include in a parent group for incarcerated fathers?
Ooh, this is a really good question because we've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And we have parenting groups in all of the facilities, and they are great. They're great parenting groups. What I have found, though, working with the gentlemen that I work with, is that the developmental stages of your children and some other things that we typically put in parenting groups aren't necessarily what they need while they're incarcerated. What they need are great examples on how to stay connected with your child, and not only stay connected with your child, but how do you do that? So we talk about read the same book as your 7-year-old, and then when you're on the phone, talk about that book with your 7-year-old. We talk about the fact that it's not okay to use your child as a mechanism to get the caregiver to do what you want, i.e. don't spend your time on the phone with your 7-year-old saying, and tell your mom to put some money on my books. We hear that on the phones a lot. And honestly, when I talk to the guys about that, when I hear it, they're just shocked that that's not okay. So we need to move to the level of realistic parenting skills, I guess.
Just a comment about the doula program. This is not a state-funded program, and so they depend on private donations. They're a nonprofit organization. And for those people who are not in the room, I realize that you're not able to contribute to the raffle. However, today is Gift to the Max Day. So they are one of the organizations that is listed on that. So please feel free to give as you are moved to do so.
I'm curious about people who've had success with voluntary programs like the doula program or the Mind the Gap program, and whether people think that's possible as something that could prevent incarceration if it happened earlier, like Deborah was talking about. I know that Hennepin County has had some trouble with like child protection getting families to voluntarily do wraparound services, and I wondered if you think this is something that could be valuable pre-prison, or whether it sort of takes the experience of incarceration to get people to buy in.
I can answer from the Mind the Gap, and we kind of do see this in the fact that Mind the Gap itself was, one of our partners was Father Project, and Father Project still exists. And I've had the opportunity of sitting in some of the parenting groups and some of the groups. And what I see is they learn about parenting, they learn about their children, they learn about all these important things, but they become resources and support to each other. And so that in and of itself, I think really is kind of a preemptive strike of going to incarcerate, because they share their stories. Our Mind the Gap guys share their stories about what it was like to try to parent and stay connected to their child while they're incarcerated, to another young father that maybe is on the cusp but hasn't gone to prison yet. I like to think that that helps. I prefer to, I think that helps.
I'd also like to respond, and I know that we at least have some nurse home visitors in the audience too, because that's a program that's been shown to be effective in really rigorous randomized control trials with women, particularly who are first-time mothers who have never had a baby before. Long-term outcomes, 15-year-long outcomes, looking at reduced likelihood of involving the women in crime. So if we can get them involved in wraparound services, provide them with prenatal education and support within their baby's first 3 years of life, those moms are less likely to be involved in criminal activity, but actually 15 and 20 years down the road, their kids are also less likely to be involved in antisocial behavior as well. So it has intergenerational impacts, and so I think that's why we've seen a lot of federal attention given to programs like nurse home visiting and David Old's program, really focusing on understanding what the long-term implications of providing comprehensive services to women and involving fathers in that way too.
For Lori Lofrano. Lori, I'm not sure I heard anything about outcomes from the Mind the Gap. What were the outcomes? And also, what have been the outcomes from your position that's really shared between DHS and Department of Corrections?
Okay. Outcomes on the Mind the Gap grant aren't technically published yet. Our evaluation went to the federal office, I don't know, I'm going to say 4, 5, 6 months ago. And so we're not at liberty to share specifics until they actually publish the outcomes for whatever reason. I throw out the recidivism number because I'm proud of that number, and so I do share that number, but the actual outcomes will be published soon, I hope. Outcomes of my position, I can tell you as far as child support goes, the arrearages that accrue while somebody is incarcerated have decreased dramatically over the last 7 years. Prior to my position, if someone who owed child support went to prison, they basically were told, good luck, file that motion on your own, and go through that legal process. I can tell you that's next to impossible when you're incarcerated. You can't serve people, you don't have access to address information, you don't have the internet, despite what some people think. They don't have the internet. They need money to be able to send things. So my position is kind of bridging that gap between the county child support office, having them do those motions and get that child support stopped while they're incarcerated. And again, I had a hard time with this because I collected child support for 17 years. I think it's an important program. So in my head, I had a hard time thinking, well, you went to prison, why should your obligations stop while you're here? Your kids still gotta eat, they still need tennis shoes. But bottom line is, if we can stop that child support and eliminate some of those arrearages that used to add up, they are so much more likely to reconnect to the program and pay once they're out and stable, versus pushing them completely away. Let's face it, if you owe somebody $50,000, you're gonna, I don't know, I think a lot of people are gonna run and hide, right? You're not gonna wanna address that. And I think a lot of these people just get so far behind that they just don't see the benefit of working with the program. So this has helped.
I wanted to make a comment on the question that you had about volunteer situations. I'm a teacher actually in the early childhood family ed programs in the St. Cloud School District, and one of the places where I teach a parenting class is in the Stearns County Jail. So this comment is coming by way of the programs coordinator at the Stearns County Jail. One of the things that he says about volunteers who come into the jail setting to, say, teach an art class or provide an activity or so forth, it says that the involvement of people from the community coming in for any reason, you know, to be with people that are incarcerated really does change the tone of what the experience is like for the people that are there at that time. So I'm not quite sure what you were thinking, you know, in terms of volunteering, and you had a question about volunteering as well. You know, there are some folks that are coming in professional roles, and there are some folks that are coming in volunteer roles who also have professional skills. So just for what that's worth, he really feels that the tone of what it's like at that jail is different because he has a really strong volunteer program. And most people are coming in for things like maybe AA, arts and crafts class, religious programs, you know, Let's Talk group. Our parent education class, we're teachers, we're paid to be there, but we're, you know, there as well. So just a thought. And then the other idea that I was thinking about is that what we're trying to do in the St. Cloud area is to just really improve our understanding of families impacted by incarceration while we do other work that we're already doing in the community. So I see lots of families in lots of places besides the county jail that are impacted by incarceration, and I need to do a better job of my job when I'm with those families in a typical ECFE setting.
This question is for Rebecca. As I've listened to the various speakers, almost everyone has mentioned schools. And I'm wondering what the plans are for the research agenda about teacher education, practicing teachers, what happens in classrooms.
No, I think that's a really good question, and it's one that is challenging because sometimes teachers don't know. And it's a big question about whose job is it to tell the teachers, because on one hand, teachers who know can be supportive and help, and on the other hand, we know that there are biases that teachers have and their own stigmas and their own expectations for how kids are going to behave when they do know that the parent is incarcerated. And so it's a challenge on all fronts, and I think that the science isn't there yet, and we don't know. I think teachers, every time I give a presentation, people ask me about teachers and what we can do to support teachers. I think it comes back to a basic education standpoint, educating teachers about the impact, the fact that they're likely to have a kid in their classroom who's experiencing this. You know, I had a child protection case once where So I serve as a volunteer guardian ad litem in Hennepin County, and I had a child protection case, and dad was in prison locally and mom was in federal prison many, many states away. And the child was having a lot of behavioral regulation issues, really just out of sorts. And he overheard his older sister say that mom was in prison. He didn't know. He thought he again had been lied to, and he didn't know. And his teacher called me a couple days after I had last seen her, and she said, when you come back in, can we talk about something? Because I'm concerned, because now he's running around the classroom saying, my mom's in jail, my mom's in jail, my mom's in jail. He's really bouncing all over the walls. He's disclosing all this information that he's heard from his sister now. I don't know how much of it is true. And I was really in this position of, well, it's also not my job to tell either. Like, as the guardian, I'm an information gatherer, not an information giver, and how much this teacher clearly wants to be supportive and do the right thing, but who is the giver of that information, and how do we support teachers so that they do the right things, because they really are good intentioned and want to help. There's been some really recent evidence that's come out about teachers and school connectedness for children of incarcerated parents, showing that in fact the protective factors for all kids regarding school are not unique for children of incarcerated parents. And by that I mean that school connectedness, involvement in after-school activities, teacher-child relationship, all of those things that we know are good for kids in general also seem to hold true, if not stronger, for kids who have incarcerated parents. And so I think the message is not necessarily specific and tailored to kids who have parents in prison or jail, but again, the fact that we need safe, supportive schools with teachers who have the resources that they need to do their jobs and do that well. And so it's a general message about kind of supporting kids in education settings. And maybe as the science gets there, we'll know better, a little bit more about exactly what we can do to tailor those messages for students, or for teachers, because I think your point is a good one in that kids are spending a majority of their day with teachers. And if they know, how can we help them really use that information in a way that supports the kids? So, good question.